Great. Okay. Like I said, we want you to get into the notion of planning first before we go into examination condition. Now, why is it important? Because if let's say you cultivate the habit of proper planning, the different processes that you have to undergo when you plan your situational writing, then it gets very easy, or rather it gets ingrained in your head, and it becomes a process whereby it just comes very naturally. Okay. Why do we emphasize in non-examination conditions? Because a lot of times in examination conditions, you don't have enough time to do planning. Okay, but it's still good to have that process in your head so that, roughly when you're planning, you can use it, but maybe just expedite a bit. Like you have to do it a bit faster in terms of planning in examination conditions. Okay, because you really don't have that much time to spare when it comes to examination conditions. Okay, I will just share with you the syllabus document. I think you all are very familiar with it by now. Okay. So like I was saying, you only have 1 hour 50 minutes for 3 components in your paper 1. So sit writing falls under paper 1. Okay, but just to bring to your attention, I think we did talk about the marks, right? For both sit writing and continuous writing, they are actually both 30 marks. So to really be a bit more exam smart is that you really have to try, even though you might think that sit writing is easy, doesn't mean you just do it anyhow, yeah? You still have to try to score because it's the same weightage in terms of marks. And generally, sit writing is easier, but that doesn't mean that you just anyhow write it, right? You still want to try to do your best in it so that you can get the desired scores that you want to achieve. Okay. So my suggestion is because you only have 1 hour 50 minutes. So obviously for editing, you probably will spend about 10 to 15 minutes on it. So if it's 10 to 15 minutes, that leaves you with about 1.5 hours. Okay, so 1.5 hours, assuming you use maybe slightly more for continuous writing, maybe 15 minutes to 1 hour. You only have 30 minutes to 35 or 40 minutes for your sit writing. Okay, and then 40 minutes for your sit writing, you definitely will need time to write. And also, what we're covering today is really to get you into the notion of planning, but you are not expected to do explicit planning when you are doing under examination conditions. Okay, because you see, if we were to really divide out the time, you only have maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes for your sit writing. You can't be spending 20 minutes on planning. Okay, so maybe just spend a five minutes planning, 5 to 10 minutes at most. 5 minutes, I think is a good number, good timing. Then start to plan, right? Get the process going, but maybe in really just a faster pace, right? When it comes to planning, and then you can dive into writing already. Okay, so sit writing is this. We will talk about continuous writing the next time round when we're doing writing, but not for today. Today we'll focus on sit writing. I think sit writing, you know your expectations, right? What are the expectations of you for sit writing? 250 to 350 words. This one is O levels. This document is from the Singapore Examination Board. So when you're doing O levels sit writing there, you're expected to write between 250 to 350 words. That's why I say it doesn't mean that sit writing is easier, means you just anyhow write. There is a word count to it as well. So that means you need to have sufficient information. Okay. And you also need to give like really good reasoning and good explanation in terms of all the substantial information that you've provided. Okay. Then it will involve reading visual text. I think all this you're familiar. It can be any genre. It can be like it can be an email, it can be a letter, a report, or a speech to suit the purpose, audience, and context. Okay, so in summary, basically for sit writing is always about the purpose, audience, and context. Yeah, and also of course the relevant information. Yeah. Okay, so we will get started. I think there are no new students. All of you are my regular students, so we will not need to go through house rules. I think by now you're very familiar with that. Today's focus is on informal letter, right? Okay, so when it comes to non-examination conditions, why do we still go through if it's non-examination? Because I still want you to get into the habit of planning, but maybe not too excessively during examination conditions. So it's important to devote ample time to plan. And students often underestimate. Some students will be thinking, why do I need to plan? Just go into writing lah, right? At least plan a little bit. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Okay, so just get into the notion of doing it and really just look at it. This is the stage whereby you develop an overall view, overall picture of how your piece will look like. Because why is it essential to plan? Because you don't want to write and then halfway through you realize that, oh no, I missed out this point. I should have written it there. Then it becomes very messy. And then your thoughts become very messy as well. Okay, so it's good to tidy up your thoughts first before you go into writing. You don't need that much time for it. Maybe about 5 minutes will do. I think 10 minutes is a bit too long. Because if you're only left with 40 minutes to write, you spend 10 minutes on thinking and planning. Then you only have half an hour to write. Okay? And you will panic when you don't have enough time to finish. Then it's even worse, right? Don't put yourself in that situation, yeah? Okay, so it is essential that you will not waste time thinking about editing. Don't waste time thinking about editing. At this stage, you are also be able to ensure that the characters and problems are all well thought out and they will lead to a suitable conclusion to your piece. Okay, so this is the planning stage. We will go through under non-examination conditions first. Then after the examination conditions, you will just have to speed up with the process. Okay. Okay, so like I said just now, very often students, they don't place a lot of emphasis on. Oops, sorry. Okay, but in fact, do you know that, like I said, I've highlighted the point whereby sit writing is the same marks as your continuous writing. So all the more you should also do well in it, right? To help you pull out your marks. So it has the same weighting as continuous writing. The amount of time and effort devoted to situational writing should be comparable of that of the continuous writing. This maybe I don't entirely agree. I would think that maybe you still need a bit more time for continuous writing, because continuous writing is a little bit more complex, the process. Sit writing is quite straightforward. You know the structure of the writing, you know the content. Basically, the content is given to you. Okay. For continuous writing, sometimes you have to generate your own content, which is very I would say it will take out a lot of your mental and cognitive ability to do that. Okay. So when you are attempting situational writing, it is important to read the question once through and be aware of, as the genre suggests, the situation. That's why it's called situational writing. Okay, you have to first understand the visual that has been given to you and really understand the situation and what the genre is trying to suggest. Yeah. Okay, now there are six aspects of the question that you will need to take note of: tenor, mode, field, purpose, structure, and features. Okay, so we will talk about all this later. These are the six aspects that will help you to fulfill the main task of purpose, audience, and context and register. Okay. It is important to be sensitive to the language, which is your mode and your register, befitting of the recipient to your writing, which we will then look at the tenor and the audience. So what do we mean by the tenor? Okay. The word tenor, I think, might be very unfamiliar to some of you. Okay, basically, tenor is the relationship of the participants. Okay, let me just highlight, yeah. So tenor actually refers to the relationships of the participants in that piece of writing. Okay, so the tenor refers to the relationships. So between people, there will be relationships of the participants, right? So this one actually tells us one thing, the audience, and secondly, also it determines the tone. Because if my relationship with recipient is, maybe just cousins, then it's definitely telling you that the tone can be a little bit more informal. Okay. So in tackling situational writing, you must pay attention to the relationship among the participants mentioned in your question. In particular, is the relationship as the sender or the writer to the participant or the recipient. Okay. Now, when we talk about mode in language, we are talking about the methods of persuasion. Okay, so that's mode. Mode is the methods of persuasion. So you must bear in mind the text type you're writing. If it is a speech, then of course the mode in the language should be strong and persuasive words. But if you're writing an informal letter to a close relative, then maybe your mode should be gentle, affectionate words. Okay, gentle and affectionate words. Yeah. Now, when we talk about the field is the depth of the matter. Okay, the field is the depth of the matter in which you will need to tackle. So if the question requires you to make a recommendation based on some factors, you must make an in-depth dissection of the merits and disadvantages of at least the factors which were integral, so the factors that are important. Okay. So if it is like you see, a recommendation, right? If you're asked to give a recommendation, you need to make sure that there is depth to your recommendations. Okay. There's depth meaning that your recommendations must be something that is uh that has its own reasons behind it based on, and then you might just want to analyze what are the benefits as well as the disadvantages, basically the advantages and disadvantages of the factors. Okay, of the factors. Yeah. For you to come to a decision. So a brief discussion of the points will render little marks. So we have gone through tenor, mode, and field. Okay, let's just recap. Tenor means the relationship of the participants. Mode means, of course, the methods of persuasion. It's more like a tone. Are you using strong persuasive one? And then the field is basically the depth of the matter. Do you really go in depth in terms of your explanation and all? Okay. Then comes purpose. I know your school teachers always talk about purpose, audience, context, but I think tenor, mode, and feel are also important things that you want to also pay attention to. Okay, the relationship, methods of persuasion, as well as the depth. Okay, now we come to purpose. Of course, the purpose will help us to understand the text type. Okay, if it is, what's the purpose? The purpose is to persuade your cousin to come to Singapore. So that's informal. It tells you it's informal, right? Informal letter. Okay, structure. Structure is another thing that we want to consider. If it's a letter, what are the different features that an informal letter must have? If it's an email, what are the different components that an email must have? Okay, so for example, a formal letter will have the addresses of the sender and the recipient. Okay, so these are the different essential parts essential parts that needs to be included. Okay, structure. Lastly will be features. Features refer to the particular words and items you will need to take note of when tackling the different types of situational writing questions. Okay, so let's have a look at this question, yeah? A formal letter, you are advised to write between 250 to 350 words, which is the standard for O-levels English, okay? The CCA or the co-curricular activity which your cousin is in requires her attendance on weekends. She has seen a brochure and is looking for another CCA to join. She enjoys sports, but she does not have time over the weekends due to tuition classes, which your aunt signed her up for. So write a letter to your cousin suggesting 2 CCAs in the brochure which your cousin can consider joining. Okay, so most of the time for sit writing, right, they will give you a few pointers and the the rule of thumb is that you need to make sure you answer all the questions.